Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to do a review on Brief Border Wars. This is a game designed by Brian Train and published by Compass Games. Inside this box you're going to get 4 games: the Football War, Operation Attila, Third Indochina War, and Second Lebanon War. Just like the old quad games, you're going to get 4 games, 1 box, 1 base set of rules, and then there are going to be rules for each individual game, which will alter some of the rules, replace some, change some altogether, and then maybe even change the entire complexion of the game itself. I did an initial impressions video about this game and I gave it positive marks. Since that time I've played it several more times, played the games several more times, and my impression has not changed. I still think this is a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun with this game. I'm glad I bought it, and I definitely recommend this game. I give it 2 thumbs up. There are some caveats though. This game is not going to be for everyone. And I give you my impression or my verdict up front rather than making you wait to the end of the video. I've had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoy what Brian did here with this, the way he modeled low intensity conflicts in these brush fire wars. Things are different in this game than you're used to in other standard hex encounter games or even area movement games. You don't move your units, roll your dice, and then look at a CRT to determine the outcome. Here, there are 3 statuses in the game for units. They're ready, they're disrupted, or they're damaged. That's it. Nothing off a CRT, it's off a simple formula, which is on the back of the player aid cards. It doesn't seem so simple at first, though. At least it didn't for me when I first played it. It was probably because, like I said, I went in there with preconceived notions and old habits, and I had to adjust them. Once I adjusted them, though, it really flowed intuitively, and it makes sense. And it really does fit the design intent really well. I think Brian did a great job there. The other thing that, where this game may not be for everyone, is there is a good deal of randomness to this game. That's due to the cards. You have a set of, or a deck of cards. I've just got 3 here for the Salvadorans. There are 3 here for the Hondurans, because I just drew 6 cards and there were 3 each. What happens is you draw 6 cards each turn, and then you determine who has the initiative by who has the most cards. In this case, we have 3 white for Salvador, El Salvador, and then 3 for Honduras. The scenario dictates that El Salvador wins ties. So El Salvador will have the initiative here. They get to act first with these cards. And the cards do 2 things. They give you the option to fight with a certain amount of units or to move a certain amount of units. Now that right there may seem constricting to some, and that randomness is not going to be enjoyable. I embrace that randomness, that chaos. I think it's great because you don't know, hey, what these cards are going to be. Hey, I just grabbed these cards. Am I going to be able to do what I want to do next turn? Let me look. I want to move these 5 units. Oh, great. I have a 5 movement card. I can move those 5 units. But fortunately, when I move them, I also have a 6 and a 7 combat. So I can actually move those 5 units and I can fight them as well. That's great. I may get a 5 movement, but I may get 2 combat. So only 2 units can fight, which is the part of the fun of the game is you don't know. 3 out of 4 games do work very well solitaire. The 4th one, I personally think it would be better off opposed, and we'll get to that here when I talk about the different scenarios. But these cards, like I said, make things really interesting. Playing solitaire, it works, but playing opposed, it would make a big difference because when you're playing opposed, I don't know what you got in your hand. Now I'm dealing with fog of war, total fog of war, because I don't know how many units you can move, how many units you can fight. So where is your intent going to be? Where's your push going to be? It's pretty obvious the way these maps are set up. There's 2 main roads. I'm just going to stick to Football War as an example. There are 2 main roads. This is what you need to use to get into Honduras from El Salvador. You can go across the border elsewhere, but to do so is going to cost you double movement. So instead of 1, like I showed you here, 3 movement, if I wanted to move, say, this unit into this location in Honduras, well, instead of being just 1 unit, counting only a 1 against here, well, it's going to count as 2. So now I've used 2 of my movements. I only have 1 more movement to use, and I can't do that again with the other guy across the border. I'm going to have to move one of these guys up a roadway because the road movement is just 1. And I think that's pretty neat. Like I said, it works solitaire. It'll work better opposed. Hopefully, Compass will get a vassal module out because with the way things are right now, not everybody can play face-to-face, so having a Bassel module would be really, really good, and I hope that they can do that pretty soon. Then the other caveat, like I said, was just the way the combat works. The wording in the rulebook, it's not difficult. It's just different than we're used to seeing that presented in a rulebook. It would have been better, I think, if it was like kind of in a table format. There is on the back, let me pull one of the scenarios here. On the back of the player aids here, or the back of the rules, gives you the player aid. And it has a combat resolution step that explains how the combat works. So it says here, if the hits are less than the combat value of an undisrupted defender, they are disrupted if not retreated. Disrupted defender must retreat, attacker disrupted. If the hit is greater than combat value, but less than 2 times the combat value, undisrupted defender must be disrupted and may retreat, the defender's option. Disrupted defender or attacker damaged. And then here we've got hits are greater than 2 times the combat value, unit is damaged regardless of side or situation. So it sounds like there's a lot of exceptions in there, and there are. And at first it can be frustrating because the way it's written in the rules, well, this is not the base rules, but the way it's written in the base rules, at first I was constantly referring to it going, okay, what do I do here? What do I do there? But like I said, trust the formula on the back of the player aid and it will flow a lot quicker. Now, one other thing that I would recommend, if you're going to get this game, I have an order that I recommend you play the games in. Don't follow it if you don't want to, that's fine, but I would just recommend this order for gamers to get their heads wrapped around the game and to enjoy it to the fullest ability. I would start with Operation Attila, then go to Football War, Third Indochina War, and Second Lebanon War last. Reason being is Attila is pretty much the easiest one to grasp, especially when you're playing it for the first time and you're just getting the rules down. Because you're on an island, so it's basically a brawl in an arena. And it's pretty straight up, pretty straightforward, easy to understand, and it'll be an easier entry, I think. Then you get into Football War and Third Indochina War, where you have to deal with road networks and pay close attention to those. That is just a minor thing, but it does alter the way you're thinking. So I would recommend going that route. And then with Second Lebanon War, the reason why I would say that would be better opposed is Hezbollah is dealing with irregular units and rocket units. They're rockets, they're just using to rain down metal on Israel to score points, and those are going to counteract points that Israel scores by taking victory point locations. That alone is, to me, I think makes it better opposed, because they both have an active attacker situation. The rest of these are pretty much attacker-defender for the most part. Attila is kind of like that too. Both are attacking. But these two especially are attacker-defender. But with the Second Lebanon War, you have an attacker-attacker situation. The main reason, though, why I think it's be better opposed is because the rules are exceptions to the exceptions in the base rules. So there's a lot of exceptions to change in your head that when you've learned these exceptions, then you've got to learn new exceptions. And that could be a little difficult to try to keep in your head when you're trying to play both sides. But again, I think it would be really fun to play that opposed. All right, we're going to talk about the terrain now. And this was the other sticking point I had with the game. There is no terrain legend on the map. And that's frustrating because it's a really easy thing to add. Out of the box, there's nothing to explain to you what urban terrain is. There are 3 types of terrain in the game. And just by looking at the map right here, you're going to be able to tell which one's mountain and which one's forest. So look for the mountains, look for the trees. Pretty simple, right? All right, where is the urban icon? There is none. You see mountains, you see trees, don't see anything for urban. This is where the confusion is. Urban is the black at the top of the circle where the victory point is. That is the thing that was throwing me off. Because the reason why it threw me off is, okay, that makes sense, that makes sense. Okay, is this supposed to be urban? Or is this the backdrop to make the victory points stand out in this icon, in this graphic? There was nothing to explain it in the rules, so that was just where the frustration came from. And once we got it clarified that yes, the black top of the half circle there, that being urban, okay, makes total sense now, problem solved. That would have been so much better if Compass had just put it on the map itself, because we've got this inset image here that explains where in the world this conflict took place. So having a simple graphic for a map legend here that would explain the graphics for the terrain would have been a good thing. Hopefully they can correct that in the future. Now you know what the terrain icons are. It's not an issue. But gameplay itself, like I said, it moves fast, 45 minutes, 60 minutes for a game, and I like how it's back and forth. The combat is really interesting. Like I said, it's different, and once you get over that difference, you'll find out that it really does match the low-intensity conflicts that Brian's modeling. Let's take a look at an example of combat. We've got this stack of units that has moved from El Salvador into Honduras. This stack of 5 units, they're going to attack the Honduran unit there in El Amatillo. They've got a total combat value of 9. Each of these combat values is equal to 1d6, so you're going to roll a bucket of dice, 9d6. You hit on 5s and 6s. The defender is going to be rolling 2d6. It's 9 to 2. When you look at it from a traditional CRT perspective, you're like, wow, it's 4 to 1. These guys are going to be nothing more than a smoking hole in the ground, and we're just going to waltz right through. We're going to take these 3 victory points pretty easy. It's not going to be any contest. It's not that easy in this game, and this is where I think the modeling of the combat is really good, especially due to the fact that we're dealing with low-quality troops. The second, third echelon troops, militias, local forces, things like that, farmers. These guys just get pulled off the farm, handed an AK, and thrown into combat. What are they going to do? They're going to run up, they're going to get behind cover, they're going to stick their rifle around the corner, and they're going to spray and pray. They're not going to sit there like your frontline troops and be disciplined and motivated. They're going to have no trigger discipline. They're not going to look and pick their targets. They're just going to be throwing lead down range. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. The way I see the results are not necessarily losses, even though you can go to a step loss side with disruption. I see that as just pressure. Units being pushed back or forward based on how much pressure they're exerting on their opponent and how willing the opponent is to stay in the fight. So in this instance, we got 9 to 5 is what we're going to roll. We're going to roll our d6. We get nothing on the first 6. Now we're going to roll the other 3. And wow, we get a hit finally. The attacker gets 1 hit on the defender. Combat simultaneous, so we're going to roll 5d6 now for the defender. And they get 2 hits. The defender resolves their defense first, their result first. They are what you call potentially disrupted because they've taken 1 hit, which is 1 lower than their CV. If you get a hit lower than your CV, you can potentially disrupt, which means you can either disrupt, stay in place, or I can say, you know what, I'm going to shrug that hit off, too much pressure, I'm going to pull back. No harm, no foul. We get rid of that one. Now for the attacker, it's not as good. These guys went in there, they're pushed by their commandante to go in there and attack. They take 2 hits, which means these guys threw a lot more lead down range. A couple of these units now are going to suffer some losses. I've got a couple options as a defender when I assign these hits. I can either hit 1 unit twice or 2 units once. What I'm going to do, because the attacker, it's worse for the attacker, I'm going to assign 1 hit to each of these guys. Now they get disrupted. 1 hit for an attacker disrupts. If you get equal to or greater than your combat value, it damages you. So right now, what was once a 5-unit stack is now a 3-unit ready stack. The other 2 are disrupted. They're just going to be able to, you can get them back later on, but if they had gone and gotten damaged, that would have been a little bit more difficult to get them back out, although not impossible. And this is where those special action cards come into play. If all 5 units were disrupted, I can take a special action card, discard it, and flip these guys from disrupted to ready. These defenders here did a pretty good job. Yeah, they gave up the 1 victory point, but they stayed in the fight and they've dropped back to this 2-point victory location and they've stung the attacker. And one additional piece of combat is air power. Let's say this fight's still going on. The Salvadorans want to bring in their 3 aircraft to support the ground mission here. The Honduran can play a special action card and they can reaction in their own aircraft. If they have aircraft and the Salvadorans have aircraft, both sides do 1 round of dogfighting, and how that works is you just take all your CV In this instance, it's 5 for the Salvadorans. It would be however many for the Hondurans. And you just dice off, and 5s and 6s, those units will RTB and they'll just be disrupted and they'll have to recover at the end of the turn. If any units are left over, like in this instance, say we just have these 3 units left, or only 3 units came in and Honduras does not have any aircraft, they're going to give an additional 1d6 as ground support for the troops attacking the Hondurans. So they'll just add that 3d6 to their total combat factor roll, and that will hit on 5s and 6s just as they do for the ground combat. Now let's change up the example of combat just a little bit. Say the attackers were highly successful, the defender didn't get anything. These guys get damaged. What happens when you're damaged? You just move to the damage track. We've got a few other units that start that way at the beginning of the game, and they're out there until they're brought in. There's 2 ways to bring them in. You can either do a recovery at the end of the turn when you have your recovery phase, which is essentially a rally. You roll d6s and they will recover on 5s or 6s. That means they go into the rear area and they can then be deployed onto the map. Or you can take a special action card, discard that, and move all the units from the damage track into the rear area, and they are again ready to deploy out onto the map. But as I said, I like the combat model in this game. You've got low quality troops fighting each other. There's going to be a lot of windmilling. There's not going to be a lot of toe-to-toe slugfest going on here. So eventually someone's going to connect, and when they connect, the guy's going to go, ow, that hurts, I'm going to run away. Not like you're going to have frontline troops that are going to stand toe-to-toe, slug it out. The low-quality troops, you're not going to have always high-quality output from them. So this back and forth is very indicative of low-intensity conflicts, and I really like the modeling of it in this game. I just mentioned special action cards, so we'll talk a little bit more about those. There are 6 of these that each player gets, and these are one-time use cards. You take them, you use it, and you discard it. It is gone for the game. Being that the game is only 7 turns, you have a good chance of making it all the way through to the end with not using all of them, but you sometimes will be in a situation where you need to use a couple of them in a turn and they'll rapidly dwindle. And it's also a good play to try to force your opponent to use those cards because they do same things in every game, but then each game also has some unique capabilities. So it's something that you've got to bear in mind, another part of the strategy aspect of the game. And one of the ways you can use the cards is with a reaction move. In this instance here, we've got 2 Salvadoran units attacking the Honduran unit. You discard one of your special action cards and do what's called a reaction move. You bring this unit in from here and this unit in from here to adjacent areas. And now instead of 2-to-1, it is 2 against 3. And that changes things up, especially like we talked about before. When you add in the defensive dice, you've got 4 CV versus 6 CV, plus you've got 3 for your defense for the terrain. And now you've got 9. So it's 4 against 9. It's going to be much more difficult for the attacker to get the defender out of there. And that's what you're going for, is the victory point locations. And that's, again, as a defender, where you want to make sure that you're protecting. And the other way that the special action cards can be used in Football War is the enemy rear area raid. What you do is you discard your special action card, and if you're Honduras, you can take your aircraft units and move them into the Salvadoran aircraft area, roll your d6 based on your CV, and for 2 hits, if you want to attack the airfield, you can put the airfield out of commission, and then that, in turn, takes the aircraft for El Salvador out of commission, so they cannot do ground support missions for the Salvadorans. That's a good thing to do. The other is you can do just MSR strikes. So you want to hit your main supply routes, you go in there, and if you get, say, 4 hits on them, they're going to put these 4 hit markers out in the rear area, and this will sit here till the next turn. And if they are not removed, that means that for every hit not removed, your opponent is going to have to give up one of the cards that they get in the next draw. So if you draw 3 cards in the next draw and you got 4 hits, well, you're going to cough up 3 cards. You're not going to be able to do anything next turn. It's easy enough to shrug it off, though, because you can just use one of your special action cards to make them go away. Boom. Now, magically, they're all gone. But in doing so, I, as the Honduran, have made you use one of these special action cards. If I can whittle those away, you're not going to be able to utilize them for, like I said, rear area enemy strikes on me, or in reaction moves when we get into combat and you need the last couple of victory point locations to be able to win the game. And I think that's pretty cool. And another thing to keep in mind, if you're the defender, the attacker has 7 turns to get X amount of victory points. It's usually going to be in 6 or better to win. 4 or 5 is going to be a draw. If you get any less than that, then you're going to win as a defender. So they're going to need 6 or more to get a minor to a major victory. So they're going to be shooting for these locations, and it's pretty easy to see which ones they're going for. How they're going to get there, though, is where the interesting journey is in this game and how the strategies are played out. For the attacker, you need to be aggressive. Aggression is the key to this game to win. You have to be aggressive. You cannot sit there dilly-dally, and you've got to get in there, attack, attack, attack. You only get a certain amount of impulses, and those are variable each turn, and the impulses are your cards. One turn you may get 1 card. One turn you may get 2 or 3. Another turn you may get 4 or even 5. You don't know, because the randomness of the draw will make it really interesting and changing all the time, and you cannot count on how much of a chance you're going to get next turn. So this turn is going to be the most important turn each turn that you take. And for the defender, by the same token, it's a good idea to pass. Okay, you've got units here. Okay, I could, if I wanted to, attack, counterattack. Do I need to? Do I really need to? I can just sit here and tie you up. Or I can move out and protect other routes, other areas. As the defender in the scenario defender, if you attack, now they are the defender and they get the terrain benefit. So for the defender, you definitely can pass. And if the other player only has 1 or 2 cards and you've got the majority of cards, and you can use your movement, for example, to move your guys out and spread your units out better to protect your victory point locations, then pass. Once they play their 1 card, if they don't want to play a special action card, after that, the turn's going to be over if you pass again, because 2 passes, that's it. So now you've taken away another turn on the player, and that is pretty cool. One other aspect of the game that I enjoyed, it can be frustrating, it can be maddening. I talked about it in my initial impressions video. That also could be a turnoff for some people, are the random events. There are random events in the game. You get 2 event cards per deck, and when you draw it, you roll a d6, and then you determine what the outcome of the event is. I've had a couple of crappy events happen to me, like I'd mentioned, where I was playing 3rd Indochina War. The first event happened on, I think, the 1st or 2nd turn. I had 2 cards in my hand. One of them was the event card, the other was a regular card. The event roll was both players discard a card. Bupkis. I had nothing after that. It sucked to beat China. Well, then we get to turn 5, and there was another event card. Roll that event, and it was a peace talk event, and that moved the game from 7 turns down to 6 turns, and that really put me in a bind, and I ended up losing that game, but very, very tightly, because like I had mentioned in the initial impressions video, I think these games are nicely balanced to where if you just don't blow it, you're going to get victory points, and it's going to be tight getting to the victory allocation that you need for whether it's a minor or a major victory. That's where the challenge is going to be, but balance-wise, I think the games are very well balanced, and if you don't like random events, though, that's something else that you may not like with this game. But I love them. And one of the things I forgot to mention before when it comes to the combat, we were talking about reaction moves and bringing these guys in. If they're the defender, they're the attacker, now you get the little extra benefit where you're going to be much more difficult to defeat. The big key to remember is the defender resolves their disposition first after the attack is done. It's important to know that, because if you disrupt and retreat units willy-nilly, you could end up playing and incorrectly screwing up your placement that can have long-term repercussions. So you need to make sure that your defender disposition is determined first, then the attacker's disposition after that. Where this is important is in retreating. Okay, we're just going to go back to this example I had before with 2-on-1. If I get hit and I want to retreat rather than take the hit, I'm going to retreat into here, and I'm going to stay fresh. This gives this unit, this victory point location, now has a unit in it. I did surrender that 1 point, but I'm still protecting the 2 points. You need to make sure that you don't just say, hey, I attacked you, you attack me, boom. All right, we'll just all start moving units around. No, as a defender, you need to make sure you do yours first, then the attacker resolves theirs. And where this can also come into play is these supply lines. Let's move this battle up over to here, for example, and we'll take these guys off the map. If these guys hit him and he retreats, well, he's going to retreat over to here. He could also retreat up there or even into this area. But if he retreats to here and he stays undisrupted, he's now broken that line of supply for these units unless they can clear that line of supply. So this, again, is why the defender disposition needs to be determined before the attackers. And also, again, another layer in the game that I really like when it comes to the movement and how you have to be thinking when combat is over, because you may get hit, you may retreat, but it may be advantageous for you to retreat into an adjacent area, not towards your own lines, but into any adjacent area. And in this instance, I protected the 2 victory points, and I've broken the line to the MSR for the Salvadorans. All right, so my final thoughts here. I think this is a very good game, or set of games, I should say. The production quality is great, but could be improved a little bit by adding in the simple map legend. Like I said, we've got the inset here for where the battle is in the world. Having a little map legend here, or even up by the turn track, would be fine. Anywhere on the map that just explains what each of the icons is. Now that we all know it, it's not a big deal. But if you get this game, you go into your game store, you pick it up off the shelf, you take it home, you don't look at BGG, you don't look at this channel, you don't really know anything about the game. Out of the box, it's going to be confusing, just like it was for us out of the box. So that's just a little minor detail that hopefully Compass will be able to address in the next iteration. Also, the combat, I think, could have probably done with like a table format, a little bit, something a little more familiar to wargamers for them to understand it. Now, the shorthand formula on the back of the play rate totally makes sense once you get through the processing, the different exceptions, and the combat. It does make total sense. And just trust it. You're going to get it. It's not a big deal. I've enjoyed all these games solitaire so far and really look forward to playing these opposed. I'm not sure when that chance will be with the way things are right now in the world. Hopefully Compass will be able to get a vassal module made of this, because I would love to be able to play this opposed online, because like I said, 45 minutes an hour, you can knock these games out. I really like the way these battles are portrayed, the way the combat mechanics work. These are back and forth punching matches. They're not slugfests, and have been a lot of fun for that reason. There's a lot of nuance, I think, in where you play your special action cards and where you can force your opponent to play theirs. Like I talked about before, I showed you the examples. If you can make them use them for recovering purposes, you're limiting their use offensively. And for the defender in this game, that's very important. Just like I said before, defender, you want to burn through those turns as fast as you can. You want to make the attacker burn through the special action cards and not be able to take advantage of using them offensively against you. And also passing. Passing is a very valid tactic and a very smart thing to do for the defender. Another thing which I don't think I did not hit on exactly with combat is you can choose the units that will fight. So I've got this stack here, and say I've got the stack in here, and if I want to just use 2 units, and I've got a 2 combat card, I can attack with just 2 units on this 1 unit. If they've got 3 units in there, I can still use 2 units to attack 1 specific unit. You're not forced to attack with all units against all units. You can attack with all units against 1 unit, or half your units against 1 unit, or 2 units, whatever. I like that capability to choose, that freedom to choose who my target is, because there are times where you may just want to key on 1 unit or 2 units just to whittle down the attacker if you're the defender, or if you just want to, again, wear down the defender if you're the attacker. So I like that fact that you can go back and forth with that, and you have that freedom to do so. And like I mentioned, defender, pass as often as you can. If you're in good position, pass. There's no need to attack. There are times to attack, but I rarely attack as a defender. I generally just sit there and make the attacker come after me. The attacker needs to be aggressive. You only have 7 turns to get your victory points. The game will move by very fast, and you never know how many cards you're going to have on each turn. So treat each turn like it's your last, because if you get 3 or 4 cards this turn, that's great. Next turn, you may only get 1. So maximize those cards to the best of your ability each turn. And I think, again, that's just one of the other nuances that I like in the strategy, the way you have to handle each of the turns in the game. That randomized card draw, I think, is also fantastic. And when you're playing opposed, I think it'll be really fun for a fog of war aspect, and it'll keep you guessing as to what your opponent is going to do. And not only is the randomization of how many units you can move and fight each turn different, it's who's going to get the initiative. You may not have initiative next turn, and you may need to take that first move. So again, the randomness of the cards is not going to be for everybody, but if you like it, like I do, it's a lot of fun. And a note on that, when you draw these cards, these event cards have, like all these cards have stripes on the back to tell you which card, which player gets them, whether it's gray or white. Well, the event cards have that as well. When you draw your cards, look in your hand. If you have an event card, which is going to look like this on the back, but it's going to have an event on the front, you need to take that out of your hand. So you need to make sure that neither player has an event card in their hand before you determine initiative. I threw myself off first time I played this game by, say, drawing 3 cards each. And oh no, this guy has a scenario advantage, so he goes first. Meanwhile, this other guy had the 3 cards, but one of them was an event card, or maybe the other way around. Take that event card out of your hand, and that's going to be your hand count when it comes to determining initiative. So just another little note to remember there. Like I said, if you're looking for quick playing games where you are on a clock, 7 turns, you've got to get a certain amount of victory points to win the game. You have some randomness in there, and it's a constant tug of war with lower echelon troops. You're not going to ever get a knockout blow. Even if you get a knockout blow, it's going to be very brief. It's going to be, you knocked them down, but you didn't knock them out. And I like that in the game. Neither side is going to be out of the game. There's going to be no runaway winner. I think a very finely balanced game and a lot of fun. So if you like all of those things I talked about, this is definitely a game to check out. If you're not a fan of randomized initiative and the cards and the event cards and things like that, then it's not going to be for you. But those who really like this type of gameplay, you're going to really enjoy this one. And I recommend you checking it out. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.